Alright, so this is adding fractions practice number 2. We are going to be focusing on how to use picture diagrams whenever we are adding our fractions. Now, when you get questions with picture diagrams in it, the picture diagrams will work for those fractions, but they don't always work, and I'll actually give you an example of that towards the end of the video. Alright, so if you have the companion resource, we're going to go ahead and start out with number 1. So number 1 is 2/9 plus 2/3. So our first bar is going to look, oh, that wasn't very good. Trying to get these spaced out correctly. So there's our 2/9 plus our 2/3. Now solving these requires us to create a common denominator, just like we would any other addition problem with unlike denominators. We cannot add 2/9 and 2/3. We have to come up with a common denominator. And the way we do this with a picture is actually really easy. All we do is we start at the left over here, and we work our way over, and every time we see a line, we draw a big line through all three. And we just go down the line and we just draw these lines. So what we're doing, that was a bad line on my part. So what we're doing here is we are setting all of these to the same denominator, because now each of these is separated into 9 parts. So 9 becomes my common denominator. And because my lines all line up between my two fractions that I'm adding, my 2/9 stays the same, but now my 2/3, which is what I started with here, my 2/3 now has become 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ninths. And so now I'm going to add 2/3 and 6 ninths, and I'm going to get 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to end up with 8 ninths. And that's all I have to do on these problems. All right, let's go on to number 2. So number 2, we have 1/3 plus 5/6.
If you want a glow dance ticket, go to room 226, Miss Waldrop. Go to room 226.
All right, so on this one, actually, you know what? Let's change that to 1/6. That was a typo. Change that to 1/6. So on this one, just like we did last time, we're going to start at the left, and it doesn't matter which one of these fraction bars we're working with, these graphics, these pictures. We're just going to move from left to right, and the first time we hit a line, we're going to draw a line all the way up and all the way down. So first line we come to is here, and the next line is here, and so on and so forth. Okay, so My 1/3, now I've broken that into 6 parts, and 2 of them are shaded. My 1/6, nothing changed on that, and so I've got 1, 2, 3, 6. Now the simplest equivalent I can come up with, if I want to simplify or reduce my answer, 3/6 is also equivalent to 1/2. And I always want to try to write my fraction in its simplest form. All right, let's do one more. All right, let's do number 3. And number 3 is 1/10 plus 3/5.
Taruno, could you come to the office? Mr. Taruno, come to the office.
All right. So here's my 1/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. And then here's my 3/5. So again, same thing we've been doing before. I'm just going to go down both fraction bars. I'm going to go down both graphics, and every time I see a line, I'm simply going to trace that line all the way down to the bottom into my answer picture. So everywhere I see a line. So my 1/10 didn't change, but my 3/5 did. So because my answer is going to be in tenths, my 3/5 here is no longer 3/5. It's got 10 pieces, so that's my denominator, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those are shaded in. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tenths is my answer. All right. Now, this particular method will not work on all fractions. Now, anytime you see a problem that's set up this way, it will work with those fractions, but it won't necessarily work with all of them. So let me give you an example of where this will not work, because this is not a strategy you can use all the time. All right, so I'm just going to do, I'm going to do a simple one. I'm going to do 1/3 plus 1/2. Now, when I finish, what I need to have is I need to have my answer picture, which is what we are creating at the bottom. I need to have it split up into equal parts. Well, if I trace the lines for 1/3 and 1/2, I'm not going to end up with equal parts. I'm going to end up with 5 parts, but they're not equal. I'm sorry, I'm going to end up with 4 parts, but they're not equal. So that's a problem. Now, if you have worked with common denominators before, you know that one method that we can use is to multiply the two denominators by one another. So in this case, I can multiply 3 times 2 to get 6 as a common denominator. And so 6 becomes my new denominator for both. But then I have to figure out what the numerators are. Now, because I multiplied the 3 by 2 to get 6, I also need to multiply the 1 by 2. I need to multiply them by the same thing. So that would give me 2/6. Since I multiplied the 3 by 2 to get 6 here, I also need to multiply the 1 by 3 to get my numerator. I have to multiply both top and bottom by the same thing. So on the right, I've multiplied by 3, and on the left, I've multiplied by 2 on both top and bottom. Now the reason why I can do that is because 3 over 3, that's just one whole. And 2 over 2 is one whole. So all I'm really doing is multiplying these fractions by 1, which doesn't change their value, it just gives me a different denominator and numerator. And so my answer ends up being 5/6. And I could not do that using this method. Most of the time, or all the time that you're given this with a problem, it will work the way we've done it. But you can't use this with some other problems. Some other problems you're going to have to find a common denominator in a different way.